passionate, driven, enthusiastic, euphoric. This is who we are as entrepreneurs. But how we leverage these incredible attributes to dream and build businesses that scale and grow is what this podcast is all about. Hello, I'm attorneypreneur Josh Brown, and welcome to Franchise Euphoria. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Franchise Euphoria. Josh Brown here, and thrilled to be here. Today, we are going to take a little break from the interviews. Done quite a few of them over the last month or so, and been fantastic. Hopefully you find them fantastic as well. But today, going to be providing a quick tip of the day that's really focused on the three things that you as a franchise buyer need to watch out for in the franchise agreement. In my legal practice, I come across obviously many issues in the franchise space, but the three things I talk about today are going to be three very, very common issues in franchising that if they're not taken care of on the front end, they can really come back to bite you as the franchisee on the back end. The first thing is when you are deciding on the franchise, you need to pay very, very close attention on your territory. And there's many aspects to your territory. I mean, there's obviously where it actually is. I mean, what is it going to be defined as? Oftentimes in franchising, your territory isn't actually selected until after you sign the franchise agreement. I mean, part of the process is you have a certain period of time to go and pick the actual area in which you're going to operate. Now, granted, when I say territory, I mean the area in which you're going to operate is selected. But if it's a brick and mortar business, you haven't decided maybe necessarily on a site selection at that point. Well, that becomes very, very important, obviously. I mean, people make the mistake of believing that franchises are business in a box, and you just buy the kit and off you go. Big mistake. I mean, obviously a franchise is a system. Good franchises have a good system, a good brand, and they're going to provide you with the operational tools that are going to help make you successful. But don't kid yourself, especially if you are in a retail franchise or a brick and mortar franchise. Not only your territory, but your site selection is going to be huge in terms of your success. One of the things that I've noticed with a lot of franchise systems is as they're picking out territories, they're obviously looking at statistical analysis and stats and looking at metrics. Perhaps it's, number of vehicles that pass by an area, or, population concentrations, or all sorts of other things that they look for. You yourself have to really, really know the area in which you're about to operate. I've seen many franchise owners go into locations that from the outside looking in, they meet all the metrics. They meet all the numbers. Maybe they have 10,000 cars that pass by each day, and they're in an affluent area, and the average, the median household income is over $100,000, and all these sort of metrics that franchise owners will look at. But how easy is it to get to the location? I mean, I've seen franchises fail because they have great visibility, but you can't get to the darn place. And you have to make a turn here, and then you got to turn into a parking lot, and then you got to make a left turn here. And so you can see it from the street, but it's difficult to get to. Those are the kinds of things that you really, really need to pay attention to when you're talking about site selection inside your territory. Another thing you need to pay attention to with regard to your territory is how close is the next operator going to be? And if there is no other franchisee within or outside of your area or close by, where likely would they be? And if the franchisor can't tell you that, try to get insight by looking at others within the franchise system and see how closely they're operating. Because even though they might technically be outside your territory, and they have to be outside your territory. I mean, you have the right to a protected territory. It still may be close enough that it's going to interfere with your business and impact your business in a negative way. And so these are the kinds of things that you really need to foreshadow and think about when you're considering the territory of a business. Another thing to think about with respect to territory is, what kind of options does the franchisor allow itself through its franchise agreement? I mean, I've seen franchise agreements where the franchisor will try to leave open the option for it to open up sort of a satellite office inside the territory. So it may not have the same makings of what your franchise looks like, but it may be sort of a condensed version of it. Well, that has the opportunity to negatively impact your sales. So anytime you're looking at the territory, you need to understand that anything that gives them the ability to take away your sales, you really need to pay attention to. Along those same lines is, what are they doing from an online perspective, right? I mean, where is the future of this business going, and how much are your sales from the physical location going to be impacted from the online space? You really have to pay attention to what your franchisor is doing online, if anything, because that absolutely can have a negative impact on your location. So I think with respect to territories, I mean, there's many, many things that you have to look at, but those few things are highlights of issues that I've certainly dealt with and that I hear about on a consistent basis. I think something else that you need to watch out for in franchise agreement is the termination language and the termination provisions. Obviously, you want to make sure that you are crystal clear on what the franchisor believes gives it the right to terminate you. What kind of things have to occur for them to terminate you as a franchise? What kind of steps do they have to go through? What kind of cure period do you have as a franchisee to cure things? And see how onerous that section of the franchise agreement is. Just to here's a quick warning. It's going to be onerous. I mean, they're going to give themselves the right every which way under the sun to cancel the franchise agreement. But you also need to look at your state laws and other kinds of protections, because you as a franchisee oftentimes have consumer protections against some of that activity. But it's obviously dependent on the state you're in, the law that you're under, and I don't know any of those things. So this is just general information with regard to termination. But one thing that sticks out more than others with respect to the whole termination aspect of a franchise is issues relating to covenants not to compete, or restrictive covenants that won't allow you to compete against the business either after it's been terminated, or after you've sold the franchise, or after you've otherwise gotten out of the system. I find that a lot of franchisees really don't think about this before they get into a system. This is really one of those principal things that's different about entering into a franchise agreement versus having just starting your own business. If you start your own business and it doesn't work out, or you decide to sell, well, you have no non-compete because you are the business and you built the business. But when you enter into a franchise system, there absolutely is going to be a restrictive covenant that is going to tell you that you cannot compete with the business. Now, whether or not that covenant is enforceable is a whole nother issue, and it depends on how broadly it's drafted, how imposing it is, how restrictive it is, and there's a whole host of elements that I won't get into that impact the enforceability of that covenant. But rest assured, your franchisor will try to enforce that. And depending on the franchise that you're getting into, if they're a sizable franchise with a lot of resources, and a lot of them are, even if they're wrong and even if you are right, it will likely cost you a lot of money through litigation or through other legal means to get a non-compete issue resolved. So just make sure when you go into a franchise agreement, you go in with your eyes wide open as to what the competitive restrictions are after you get out of the system. Number 3, and this is something that, I don't think a lot of people think about, because when you buy a franchise, you just assume that, part of a franchise, the makeup of a franchise is you're buying the right to use their trademark and to use their license marks. Well, you want to make sure when you're reviewing the agreements and the franchise disclosure documents that they actually have the appropriate protections of their mark, because that's where a good portion of the value of the franchise system comes from. There's all sorts of different franchises, and there's franchises that have been around forever and have established themselves in the marketplace and actually have a viable brand that will hopefully be beneficial to you as a franchisee. And then there's other franchises that are just getting started and they're growing and expanding. And at that point, the mark and the brand really won't have that big of an impact. It's more about the operational system that they have. But you need to make sure that they have protection in that brand. I mean, I've seen systems where a franchisee pays a significant upfront fee. And it turns out, 6 months, 8 months, 10 months later, the franchise is changing its name or it's changing course, possibly because it didn't have the right protections in the mark that it has. Well, that can be not only very costly to both the franchisor and the franchisee, but that can seriously impact your own ability to have success. It can cause confusion in your marketplace, and it can bring about a whole host of other problems. So when you are looking to buy a franchise, and again, there's a whole host of things that you need to do. I would not suggest buying a franchise without seeking professional help in doing it. But 3 things that you really need to concern yourself with are territory, termination, and trademark issues. Well, that's it for the day, folks. Hopefully this was helpful, enjoyable. If you have any questions, you can always reach out to me at josh@indyfranchiselaw.com. We'll be having some great interviews coming up here, and also some great upcoming shows with some more tips of the day, as really what I'd like to do on this show is provide straightforward, easy to understand, practical advice, so that you, in whatever situation you are in, you can apply it, and hopefully it will be of benefit to you. So until the next time, happy franchising.
Thanks for being with us today on the Franchise Euphoria podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to go to iTunes and provide a review. Also, please remember that although Josh Brown is a licensed and practicing attorney, nothing contained in this podcast should be construed as legal advice, because it is not. The information contained in this podcast is general and educational in nature, and none of it should be relied upon as legal advice. That being said, if you have questions for Josh and would like to contact him, please email him at josh@franchiseeuphoria.com. Thank you so much for listening, and we hope you tune in to our next weekly episode.